In a small, quiet town where everyone knew each other's names, there was an undercurrent of tension that no one could ignore. The town had been divided for years, not by fences or walls, but by invisible lines drawn along racial and cultural differences. For decades, the local police department had been at the center of this divide. Stories of unfair treatment, biased arrests, and unchecked power circulated among certain communities, especially those who felt targeted because of their skin color. Despite protests and petitions from residents demanding change, nothing seemed to shift the status quo. That is, until Marcus Johnson arrived. Marcus wasn't just any ordinary police officer. He was a man with a reputation for fairness, built over 20 years of service in larger cities. His career had been marked by moments of courage, standing up for what was right even when it meant going against his peers. When he accepted the position as the new police chief in this troubled town, many saw it as a beacon of hope. People believed that finally, someone would address the deep-rooted issues plaguing the department. But not everyone shared this optimism. From the moment Marcus stepped into the precinct on his first day, he sensed resistance. It wasn't loud or overt. Instead, it came in subtle ways. Files he needed for meetings were misplaced. Calls for backup took longer than usual when he requested them. During roll calls, some officers exchanged knowing glances or muttered comments just out of earshot. At first, Marcus tried to brush it off. He told himself that earning trust would take time, and he was willing to be patient. After all, changing a system didn't happen overnight. But patience only went so far. As weeks passed, Marcus noticed patterns that couldn't be ignored. Complaints about racial profiling continued to pile up on his desk. Community members approached him during public forums, sharing painful stories of mistreatment at the hands of officers. One elderly woman tearfully recounted how her grandson had been handcuffed and thrown to the ground during a routine traffic stop, all because of the color of his skin. Another man described being stopped multiple times while driving through predominantly white neighborhoods, despite having done nothing wrong. These accounts weighed heavily on Marcus, fueling his determination to make things right. Despite these challenges, Marcus pressed forward. He introduced new policies aimed at increasing accountability within the force. Body cameras became mandatory for every officer, and a civilian oversight committee was formed to review misconduct allegations. While some younger officers welcomed the changes, others resented them. Among the most vocal dissenters were two veteran cops, Franklin Hayes and Rick Dawson. Both men had spent more than 25 years on the job and prided themselves on their old-school methods. To them, Marcus represented everything they despised: change, outsiders, and what they perceived as political correctness gone too far. The tension between Marcus and the veteran officers reached its breaking point during a high-profile case involving a young black man named Jamal Carter. Jamal had been arrested after an altercation outside a convenience store, with Hayes and Dawson leading the charge. According to their report, Jamal had resisted arrest and attempted to flee. However, video footage obtained by Jamal's family painted a very different picture. It showed the officers using excessive force, pinning Jamal to the ground with unnecessary aggression while ignoring his pleas that he hadn't done anything wrong. When the case went to court, Marcus was called to testify. As the head of the department, his testimony carried significant weight. He reviewed the evidence carefully, preparing to speak truthfully about what he believed had happened. On the morning of the trial, Marcus entered the courtroom feeling a mix of nerves and resolve. He knew the stakes were high, not just for Jamal, but for the future of the department and the community it served. What happened next shocked everyone. Just as Marcus began recounting the details of the case, a commotion erupted near the back of the room. A group of off-duty officers stormed in, shouting accusations and insults. They accused Marcus of betraying the badge, of siding with criminals over his own colleagues. Before anyone could react, one of the men lunged at Marcus, knocking him off the witness stand. Chaos ensued as punches were thrown, chairs overturned, and panic spread throughout the courtroom. Spectators screamed, scrambling to get out of the way. The judge banged his gavel repeatedly, yelling for order, but the noise drowned him out. Security guards rushed in to break up the fight, dragging the attackers away as they continued hurling threats and racial slurs. By the time calm was restored, Marcus sat on the floor, bruised but defiant. Cameras flashed as reporters captured the scene, and within hours the story dominated news outlets across the country. For the people of the town, the courtroom attack was a wake-up call. Some were horrified by the blatant display of racism and violence, while others defended the officers, claiming they were justified in their anger. Social media exploded with debates, hashtags, and impassioned arguments. Supporters of Marcus organized rallies outside the courthouse, holding signs that read "Justice for All" and "Stand with Chief Johnson." Meanwhile, counter-protests sprang up, with groups chanting slogans in support of the accused officers. As the dust settled, Marcus found himself at the center of a storm unlike anything he'd ever faced. The attack had exposed the raw, ugly truth about the divisions within the town, and the length some were willing to go to protect the status quo. Yet amidst the chaos, Marcus remained resolute. He knew the road ahead would be difficult, perhaps even dangerous. But he also knew that backing down now would mean surrendering to the very forces he had vowed to fight. And Marcus Johnson was not a man who gave up easily. Little did he know, the events of that day were only the beginning of a much larger battle, one that would test his strength, his principles, and his faith in humanity. In the days following the courtroom attack, the town was gripped by a whirlwind of emotions. Shock, anger, and fear mingled in equal measure, creating an atmosphere thick with tension. For Marcus Johnson, the aftermath felt like living in two worlds at once. On one side, there was overwhelming support from those who saw him as a symbol of justice and reform. On the other, there was a growing wave of hostility from those who viewed him as a threat to their way of life. It was a delicate balancing act, and Marcus knew he couldn't afford to falter. The incident had made national headlines, turning the small, sleepy town into the epicenter of a heated debate about race, policing, and accountability. News outlets ran nonstop coverage, replaying footage of the courtroom chaos and interviewing everyone from community leaders to disgruntled officers. Social media buzzed with hashtags like "Justice for Marcus" and "Tycoon Protect Our Police," each side digging in deeper. Protesters gathered daily outside the courthouse, their chants echoing through the streets. Some held signs praising Marcus for standing up to corruption, while others accused him of tearing apart the fabric of law enforcement. Amidst this storm, Marcus struggled to keep his focus on what mattered most: rebuilding trust and ensuring fairness within the department. But it wasn't easy. Every step forward seemed to come with 2 steps back. Anonymous messages flooded his inbox, some offering words of encouragement, others filled with venomous threats. One message stood out, chilling him to the bone. "You're not safe anywhere." The sender claimed to know where his children went to school and warned that they wouldn't be spared if Marcus didn't back off. Fearing for his family's safety, Marcus made the difficult decision to move them temporarily to a secure location. His wife Evelyn tried to stay strong, but the stress was evident in her eyes. Their teenage daughter Mia barely spoke, retreating into herself as she processed the danger surrounding them. Marcus hated seeing his loved ones suffer because of his choices, but he reminded himself why he had taken this job in the first place: to create a better future, even if it came at great personal cost. At work, things weren't much better. Morale among the officers plummeted. Many felt torn between loyalty to their colleagues and respect for their new chief. A handful of brave souls approached Marcus privately, expressing admiration for his courage and pledging their support. But others outright defied him. Files disappeared without explanation, equipment went missing, and key witnesses suddenly became unavailable for interviews. It was clear that some within the department were determined to sabotage his efforts. The mayor, desperate to quell the unrest, called an emergency press conference. Standing behind a podium flanked by American flags, he attempted to strike a tone of neutrality. He praised Marcus for his dedication to reform, but stopped short of condemning the officers involved in the attack. Instead, he urged both sides to come together and find common ground. To many, his words sounded hollow, a weak attempt to appease everyone without actually addressing the root of the problem. Critics accused him of prioritizing political survival over justice, further fueling public outrage. As pressure mounted, Marcus leaned heavily on a growing network of allies. Local activists, clergy members, and concerned citizens formed a coalition to support him. They organized peaceful marches, distributed flyers educating people about systemic racism, and even raised funds to provide security for Marcus and his family. Among these supporters was Reverend Angela Hayes, a fiery preacher whose sermons often addressed social justice issues. She became a close confidant, offering guidance and encouragement during Marcus's darkest moments. One evening, after another exhausting day, Marcus met with the coalition at a community center. The room buzzed with energy as people shared ideas and strategized next steps. A young woman named Tasha, whose brother had been wrongfully arrested years earlier, stood up to speak. Her voice trembled with emotion as she recounted how the system had failed her family. "We've been fighting this fight for so long," she said, tears streaming down her face. "But now we finally have someone who believes in us, someone willing to stand up and say enough is enough. We can't let you do this alone, Chief Johnson." Her words struck a chord with everyone present, including Marcus. For the first time in days, he felt a glimmer of hope. These people, ordinary citizens with no badges or titles, were stepping up to demand change. They weren't asking for handouts or special treatment. They simply wanted fairness and respect. Their courage inspired Marcus to push harder, to dig deeper, and to refuse to give in to despair. But just when it seemed like progress might be possible, another blow landed. During a routine patrol, a group of officers deliberately ignored a distress call from a predominantly black neighborhood. When questioned about it later, they claimed they hadn't heard the radio transmission, a blatant lie that infuriated Marcus. He confronted them directly, his frustration boiling over. "This isn't just about me," he snapped. "It's about doing your job, treating everyone equally and serving the entire community, not just the parts you choose." The confrontation ended with the officers walking away smirking, leaving Marcus seething. He knew disciplinary action was necessary, but taking such measures would only escalate tensions further. Still, he couldn't let their behavior slide. That night, he drafted formal reprimands and forwarded the incident to Internal Affairs, knowing full well it might spark retaliation. Despite the obstacles, Marcus refused to lose sight of his mission. With the help of federal investigators, he began building cases against the officers involved in the courtroom attack. Evidence collection was painstaking work, requiring meticulous attention to detail. Surveillance footage, witness statements, and forensic reports all had to align perfectly to ensure a solid case. It was tedious and draining, but Marcus poured every ounce of energy into it, determined to hold the perpetrators accountable. Meanwhile, whispers of dissent continued to spread throughout the department. Rumors circulated that Marcus was planning mass firings, prompting several officers to resign preemptively. Each departure hit him hard, not because he cared about losing allies, but because it underscored the depth of resistance he faced. Yet Marcus remained undeterred. He reminded himself that real change always came with sacrifice, and he was prepared to bear the burden if it meant paving the way for a brighter future. One particularly grueling week, Marcus found himself sitting alone in his office late at night. The clock ticked past midnight as he stared at stacks of paperwork, his mind racing with thoughts of what lay ahead. Would he ever truly win over the skeptics? Could he restore faith in a system so deeply broken? Exhaustion weighed heavily on him, but then he remembered something his father used to say. "A tree doesn't grow stronger by avoiding storms, it grows stronger by weathering them." With renewed determination, Marcus straightened his shoulders and returned to the task at hand. He knew the road ahead would be long and fraught with challenges, but he also knew he wasn't walking it alone. Together with his supporters, he would continue to fight for justice, for equality, and for a world where no one had to live in fear because of the color of their skin. The turning point came unexpectedly, like a crack of lightning in an otherwise overcast sky. Just when Marcus Johnson felt the weight of the world bearing down on him, a voice emerged from within the ranks of the very system he was trying to reform. It belonged to Sarah Collins, a mid-ranking officer who had spent nearly a decade navigating the murky waters of the department. For years, she had stayed silent, choosing to blend into the background rather than rock the boat. But witnessing the courtroom attack and seeing how deeply it shook the town had awakened something inside her. She couldn't stay quiet any longer. One evening, as Marcus sat alone in his dimly lit office reviewing case files, there was a soft knock at the door. He looked up to see Sarah standing hesitantly in the doorway, clutching a thick folder under her arm. Her face was pale and her hands trembled slightly as she stepped inside. "Chief," she began, her voice barely above a whisper, "I need to show you something." Marcus gestured for her to sit, sensing the gravity of the moment. Without another word, Sarah placed the folder on his desk and opened it. Inside were documents, photographs, audio recordings, and handwritten notes, all damning evidence of corruption that stretched back decades. There were falsified reports used to justify unlawful arrests, emails detailing plans to suppress complaints from minority communities, and even transcripts of private meetings where senior officers openly discussed targeting specific neighborhoods based on race. The sheer volume of information left Marcus speechless. Sarah explained that she had been collecting this evidence bit by bit over the years, always intending to do something with it, but never finding the courage. "I told myself I was waiting for the right time," she admitted, tears welling up in her eyes. "But honestly, I was scared of what they'd do to me if they found out. And now, after everything that's happened, I realize there may never be a right time, so here I am." Her bravery moved Marcus deeply. He thanked her sincerely, promising to protect her identity while using the evidence to hold those responsible accountable. Together, they devised a plan to bring the truth to light. They knew it wouldn't be easy. Leaking such explosive material would put both of them squarely in the crosshairs of powerful enemies. But neither could afford to turn away. Now, over the next few weeks, Marcus worked tirelessly alongside federal investigators to piece together the puzzle Sarah had handed him. Each document, recording, and photograph painted a clearer picture of the systemic rot festering within the department. What started as whispers among marginalized communities now became undeniable facts supported by irrefutable proof. Dozens of officers, including some of the most decorated members of the force, were implicated in schemes ranging from planting evidence to outright bribery. As preparations for legal action intensified, so did the backlash against Marcus. Anonymous leaks to local media attempted to discredit him, painting him as power-hungry and divisive. False narratives circulated about how he had coerced Sarah into fabricating the evidence, claiming it was all part of a personal vendetta. Supporters rallied around him, countering these attacks with rallies and campaigns highlighting the importance of accountability. Meanwhile, detractors doubled down, accusing Marcus of orchestrating a witch hunt designed to destroy honorable officers. The tension reached a boiling point when Marcus received a chilling message one morning. His daughter Mia's school bus route had been altered without explanation, taking her through an area notorious for gang activity. Fortunately, nothing happened to her, but the message was clear. His family wasn't safe. Evelyn pleaded with him to step back, fearing for their lives. "We can't keep living like this," she said, her voice breaking. "Every day feels like we're walking closer to the edge." Marcus wrestled with doubt for the first time since taking the job. Was it worth risking his family's safety for a cause that seemed increasingly impossible to win? He spent hours pacing the floor, replaying every decision he'd made since arriving in the town. Finally, he called Reverend Angela Hayes, seeking guidance. After listening quietly, she asked him a simple question. "If not you, then who?" Those 4 words resonated deeply. Marcus realized that stepping down wouldn't solve anything. It would only embolden those fighting against reform. If he gave up now, the cycle of injustice would continue unchecked, harming countless others. With renewed resolve, he decided to press forward, enlisting additional security measures for his family, while focusing on bringing the perpetrators to justice. The investigation culminated in a series of raids conducted by federal agents, sweeping through the precinct early. One morning, Officers suspected of wrongdoing were escorted out in handcuffs, their badges stripped away in front of stunned colleagues. News helicopters hovered overhead, capturing the dramatic scene as reporters scrambled to cover the unfolding story. By noon, the entire nation was watching, glued to live broadcasts detailing the unprecedented takedown of corrupt law enforcement officials. In the days that followed, the town braced itself for the fallout. Supporters celebrated the arrests as a victory for justice, hailing Marcus as a hero. Critics, however, accused him of overreach, insisting that innocent officers were being scapegoated. Protests erupted once again, with opposing groups clashing in heated demonstrations. Amidst the chaos, Marcus remained focused, preparing for the trials ahead. One particularly tense evening, Marcus attended a community meeting organized by the coalition. The room buzzed with anticipation as people eagerly awaited updates on the A case. When Marcus took the stage, the crowd fell silent, hanging on his every word. He spoke candidly about the challenges they still faced, acknowledging the anger and fear gripping the town, but he also reminded everyone of the progress they had made, urging them to stay united in pursuit of lasting change. "We've uncovered the truth," he said, his voice steady and strong. "Now, it's up to us to ensure that it leads to real transformation, not just within the department but across our entire community. This isn't about revenge or punishment. It's about building a future where everyone is treated fairly regardless of their background." His words resonated deeply, earning thunderous applause. As he stepped off the stage, Tasha approached him, her eyes shining with gratitude. "Thank you," she whispered, embracing him tightly, "for believing in us when no one else would." Despite the overwhelming support, Marcus knew the hardest battles were yet to come. Trials loomed on the horizon, each one carrying the potential to either solidify or unravel the fragile trust beginning to form. Yet, for the first time in months, he allowed himself a small measure of hope. Change was possible. It was messy, painful, and slow, but it was possible. And as long as there were people willing to stand together and fight for it, Marcus believed they could overcome anything. With Sarah's evidence bolstering his efforts and the unwavering support of allies like Reverend Hayes and the coalition, Marcus prepared to face whatever lay ahead. He understood that true justice required more than convictions. It demanded healing, education, and a commitment to rebuilding trust. Though the road remained uncertain, he vowed to walk it with integrity, guided by the belief that fairness and equality were worth every sacrifice. As the trials approached, the town braced itself for what promised to be one of the most consequential chapters in its history. The courtroom became a battleground, not just for legal arguments, but for the soul of the community itself. Every day brought new developments, each one scrutinized and dissected by both supporters and critics of Marcus Johnson's reform efforts. For Marcus, these weeks were a whirlwind of preparation, emotion, and relentless determination. He knew that what happened inside those walls would shape not only his legacy, but also the future of policing in the town. The first trial centered on Franklin Hayes and Rick Dawson, the two veteran officers who had led the charge against Jamal Carter during the convenience store incident. Both men faced charges of excessive force, falsifying reports, and obstruction of justice. Their defense team argued that they were simply doing their jobs, claiming that Jamal had resisted arrest and provoked the altercation. But Marcus had seen the video footage too many times to let such claims stand unchallenged. He spent hours reviewing every detail with prosecutors, ensuring they had an airtight case. When the day finally came for Marcus to take the stand, the atmosphere in the courtroom was electric. Reporters filled the gallery, cameras clicking softly, as he walked to the witness chair. His presence commanded attention, not because of flashy gestures or dramatic flair, but because of the quiet strength he exuded. As he raised his right hand to swear an oath, he felt the weight of countless eyes upon him. This wasn't just about testifying, it was about speaking truth to power, even when that power sought to silence him. The prosecutor began by asking Marcus to recount the events surrounding Jamal's arrest. With measured precision, Marcus described reviewing the body cam footage, analyzing the inconsistencies in the officers' reports, and piecing together the timeline of events. His tone was calm, yet firm, leaving no room for doubt about his conclusions. When the prosecutor asked why he believed Hayes and Dawson had acted improperly, Marcus didn't hesitate. "It's simple," he said. "They used more force than necessary, ignored protocol, and then tried to cover it up. That's not just bad policing. It's a betrayal of the trust we owe to the people we serve." The defense attorney, a seasoned litigator known for dismantling witnesses under cross-examination, wasted no time going on the offensive. She peppered Marcus with questions designed to undermine his credibility, accusing him of bias and overstepping his authority. "Isn't it true," she asked sharply, "that you've made enemies within your own department since taking office? That some officers feel targeted by your policies?" Marcus leaned forward slightly, meeting her gaze without flinching. "Yes, I've faced resistance," he admitted. "Change is never easy, especially when it challenges deeply ingrained habits. But my job isn't to make friends. It's to ensure accountability and fairness. If holding officers to higher standards makes me unpopular, so be it." The courtroom erupted in murmurs, quickly silenced by the judge's gavel. The attorney pressed on, attempting to paint Marcus as reckless and divisive. She questioned past decisions he'd made in other departments, dredging up old controversies in hopes of casting doubt on his judgment. But Marcus remained composed, addressing each accusation with clarity and conviction. By the time the cross-examination ended, there was a palpable shift in the air. Even some of the skeptics in the gallery seemed impressed by his poise under pressure. The turning point came when Sarah Collins took the stand. Dressed in her uniform, she looked every bit the dedicated officer she was, but beneath her composed exterior lay a storm of emotions. As she recounted her experiences within the department, her voice trembled with vulnerability. She spoke of overhearing racist remarks during private meetings, witnessing colleagues tampering with evidence, and feeling powerless to intervene. "I stayed silent for too long," she confessed, tears streaming down her face. "But when I saw what happened in that courtroom, the way Chief Johnson was attacked, I realized I couldn't stay quiet anymore. Someone had to speak up." Her testimony struck a chord with everyone present. Jurors exchanged glances, visibly moved by her courage. Supporters in the gallery nodded in agreement, while detractors shifted uncomfortably in their seats. Sarah's words weren't just an indictment of corrupt officers. They were a call to action, urging others to confront uncomfortable truths and demand better from their leaders. As the trial progressed, additional witnesses corroborated Marcus's account, including civilian bystanders who had filmed parts of Jamal's arrest and independent experts who analyzed the use of force tactics employed by Hayes and Dawson. Each piece of evidence added weight to the prosecution's case, painting a damning picture of misconduct and abuse of power. Yet despite the mounting proof, the outcome remained uncertain. The jury deliberated for days, their decision hanging precariously in the balance. During this tense period, the town held its breath. Protesters continued to gather outside the courthouse, their numbers swelling as anticipation grew. Some chanted slogans calling for justice, while others waved banners supporting the accused officers. Tensions occasionally boiled over into shouting matches, requiring police intervention to maintain order. Inside the courtroom, lawyers delivered impassioned closing arguments, appealing to jurors' sense of morality and duty. The prosecutor urged them to send a message that no one, not even law enforcement, was above the law. The defense countered by framing the case as an attack on police authority, warning that guilty verdicts would embolden anti-police sentiment nationwide. Finally, after 5 grueling days, the jury reached a verdict. When the 4 persons stood to announce their decision, the courtroom fell deathly silent. "On the charge of excessive force," she declared, "we find the defendants guilty." Gasps rippled through the gallery as she repeated the same verdict for the remaining charges. Hayes and Dawson sat stunned, their faces pale with disbelief as bailiffs moved to handcuff them. Cheers erupted from supporters, while critics muttered angrily under their breath. Outside, news crews scrambled to capture reactions as word spread. Like wildfire, the conviction sent shockwaves far beyond the town. sparking national conversations about accountability in law enforcement. Civil rights advocates hailed the verdict as a landmark moment, proof that systemic change was possible. Critics, however, doubled down, accusing Marcus of orchestrating a witch hunt and vowing to appeal the decision. Despite the backlash, Marcus allowed himself a rare moment of relief. Justice had been served, at least for now, but the fight was far from over. Additional trials loomed for other officers implicated in Sarah's evidence, each one carrying its own set of challenges. Meanwhile, rebuilding the fractured department required careful navigation. Marcus introduced sweeping reforms, including mandatory cultural sensitivity training, stricter oversight protocols, and initiatives aimed at fostering trust between officers and the community. Younger recruits inspired by his leadership embraced these changes, helping to usher in a new era of transparency and integrity. Through it all, Marcus remained steadfast, drawing strength from the coalition of allies who had supported him every step of the way. Reverend Angela Hayes often reminded him of the importance of perseverance, quoting scripture during moments of doubt. "Let us not grow weary in doing good, for at the proper time we will reap a harvest if we do not give up." Her words echoed in Marcus's mind whenever the burden felt unbearable. By the end of the year, tangible progress began to emerge. Complaints of racial profiling dropped significantly, and citizen satisfaction surveys showed marked improvement. Though scars from the past lingered, hope blossomed in their place, a fragile yet resilient flower nurtured by hard-fought victories. Marcus understood that true transformation took time, patience, and unwavering commitment. And though the road ahead remained fraught with challenges, he faced it with renewed optimism, knowing that together they could build a brighter future. Years passed, and the town that had once been synonymous with division and tension began to transform in ways no one could have predicted. The trials of the rogue officers became a turning point, not just for Marcus Johnson but for the entire community. While some wounds took longer to heal than others, the ripple effects of accountability and reform slowly reshaped the fabric of the town. For Marcus, the journey was far from easy, but it was one he would look back on with pride, a testament to what could be achieved when courage met conviction. The convictions of Franklin Hayes, Rick Dawson, and several other high-ranking officers sent a clear message. No one was above the law, not even those sworn to uphold it. The guilty verdicts didn't erase the pain suffered by countless victims of racial profiling and excessive force, but they marked the beginning of a reckoning. Families who had endured years of mistreatment finally felt seen and heard. Community meetings, once tense and combative, evolved into collaborative spaces where residents and officers worked together to address concerns and build mutual trust. Marcus's reforms played a crucial role in this transformation. Mandatory body cameras became standard issue, ensuring transparency during interactions between police and civilians. A civilian oversight board, composed of diverse members from across the town, gained real authority to review complaints and recommend disciplinary actions. Training programs focused on de-escalation techniques, cultural sensitivity, and mental health awareness replaced outdated methods rooted in aggression and control. These changes weren't universally embraced. Some veteran officers grumbled about being micromanaged, while others left the force altogether. But younger recruits welcomed the shift toward modern, ethical policing. One of the most significant developments came when Marcus partnered with local schools to launch a youth mentorship program. Officers volunteered their time to coach sports teams, lead workshops, and serve as positive role models for children growing up in neighborhoods historically marginalized by law enforcement. At first, skepticism ran high. Many parents hesitated to let uniformed officers near their kids after decades of mistrust. But over time, relationships blossomed. Kids began seeing officers not as adversaries but as allies. One boy named Tyrell, whose older brother had been arrested unfairly years earlier, summed it up best. "I used to think cops were bad guys, but Officer Daniels helped me fix my bike last week. Maybe things really can change." Outside the department, Marcus's influence extended beyond policy changes. He became a national figurehead for police reform, invited to speak at conferences, universities, and congressional hearings. His story inspired similar movements in cities across the country, proving that systemic change was possible with persistence and unity. Yet, despite his growing fame, Marcus remained grounded in his mission. He often reminded audiences that true progress wasn't measured by headlines or awards. It was reflected in everyday moments of fairness and respect. Of course, challenges persisted. Not everyone supported Marcus's vision, and resistance lingered in pockets of the community. Some former officers filed lawsuits alleging wrongful termination, while others formed advocacy groups claiming they were victims of a politically motivated purge. Critics argued that Marcus's reforms weakened law enforcement, pointing to isolated incidents of rising crime rates as evidence. But data told a different story. Overall crime decreased steadily as trust improved, demonstrating that collaboration between police and citizens made communities safer for everyone. As Marcus approached retirement, he reflected on the legacy he hoped to leave behind. It wasn't about statues or monuments. It was about creating a system where people of all backgrounds could live without fear of discrimination or harm. On his final day as chief, the town gathered for a farewell ceremony at the park. Hundreds attended, including many who had once doubted him. Activists, clergy members, teachers, business owners, and even former adversaries stood side by side, united in gratitude for what he had accomplished. Reverend Angela Hayes delivered an emotional speech, her voice ringing out across the crowd. Marcus Johnson didn't just change a department, he changed hearts, she said. He taught us that justice isn't something you achieve alone, it's something we build together. And because of him, our town is stronger, fairer, and more hopeful than ever before. When it was Marcus's turn to speak, he kept his remarks brief but heartfelt. "This isn't my victory, it's ours," he said, scanning the sea of faces before him. Every person who marched, every family who shared their story, every officer who chose integrity over complacency, they're the ones who made this possible. My job here is done, but the work continues, so I ask you, don't stop fighting for what's right. Don't stop believing in the power of change, because when we stand together, there's nothing we can't overcome. After stepping down, Marcus devoted his time to mentoring aspiring leaders in law enforcement and civil rights activism. He wrote a memoir detailing his experiences, using proceeds to fund scholarships for underprivileged youth pursuing careers in public service. Statues erected in his honor depicted him standing alongside ordinary citizens, symbolizing the partnership between police and community that defined his tenure. Murals painted throughout the town celebrated themes of unity, resilience, and hope. Though retired, Marcus never truly stepped away from the fight for justice. He continued attending rallies, speaking at events, and advocating for policies aimed at dismantling systemic inequities. His presence reminded everyone that progress required vigilance, that victories won today could easily slip away tomorrow, if left unguarded. Years later, as Marcus sat on his porch watching grandchildren play in the yard, he thought about how far they'd come since that chaotic day in the courtroom. The scars of the past hadn't disappeared entirely, but they had, faded enough to make room for brighter futures. Children now grew up in a town where fairness wasn't a privilege reserved for some, it was a promise extended to all. And though Marcus knew perfection was impossible, he believed deeply in the idea that striving for better was worth every sacrifice. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting golden light over the neighborhood, he smiled softly to himself. Change wasn't easy, and it certainly wasn't quick, but it was always worth it. After all, the greatest legacies weren't built overnight. They were forged through courage, compassion, and an unwavering belief in the possibility of a better tomorrow.